Chapter 8 Loving Black Masculinity Fathers, Lovers, Friends. In my memoir of my childhood, Bone Black, the section about my grandfather begins. His smells fill my nostrils with the scent of happiness. With him, all the broken pieces of my heart get mended, put together again, bit by bit. My mother's father, Daddy Gus, was an incredibly gentle and kind human being, a quiet man with no harsh words, a respected deacon of his church. He bestowed on me the unconditional love that provided me with a psychological basis to trust in the goodness of men. He was not a patriarch. Married to Baba, our grandmother, for more than 70 years, he was also present in our lives, in the lives of his children. When he was on his deathbed, he expressed love and devotion to Baba. He had been what the preacher called one of the right hand men of God, a good and faithful servant of the divine. My dad, Mr. Veotis, is a patriarchal man. Like my grandfather, he is a respected deacon at his church. He is also a quiet man, but that is where the resemblance ends. My daddy is a man capable of harsh words and harsh actions. He was raised in a household where his daddy was not present, and he only came to know him fully late in life. Throughout our childhood, he was a stern protector and provider. Being manly meant that he eschewed any concern with love. According to patriarchal standards, he is much of a man. As a parental caregiver, Dad has always conformed to the patriarchal ideal. He has been a present father, parenting 7 children, 6 girls and 1 boy, and always bringing home the bacon. He has been for the most of our lives emotionally unavailable. As a patriarchal man, he always held to the belief that the tending to house and home to the needs of children is woman's work. Now that he's almost 80, Daddy has become more emotionally engaging. With his grandchildren, he is tender and caring, present to them in ways he was never present to us. Our brother from the start, our brother was from the start a disappointment to Dad. Like Daddy Gus, our brother is by nature kind and gentle. He is not a man of harsh words and harsh actions. While he liked sports as a boy, he was just not that interested in being a major sports figure. Our father had been a soldier and gone to war. We had pictures of him playing basketball, of him in the boxing ring, pictures of him with his all black infantry unit. My brother was bad at sports. He was a disappointment to our dad. And as a punishment, dad withheld him from affection and affirmation. In the world I grew up in, adult black males were present in most homes. Like my dad, they were providers and protectors. Mama's brothers were a constant presence in our lives and in the lives of their children. They were caring, funny, supportive. Mama loved her father and her brothers. My dad's father, Daddy Jerry, was also a beloved presence in our childhood. We did not know that he had not been present in our father's life when he was a boy. We knew that Dad had been raised as the only child of a stern and demanding mother. His childhood had not been easy. He had always worked hard. There was so much diverse masculinity in the world of our childhood that it would have been impossible for any of us to have to have a one-dimensional understanding of black life. We knew from experience that some black males were kind and gentle, others cruel and indifferent, that some fathers were present and some fathers were absent. All our segregated institutions were led by benevolent black male patriarchs, men who were respected and admired. The way she writes. Coming from this environment, when I reached college at the beginning of the 70s, I was stunned by the way that black men were described in novels and sociological and psychological literature. From these books, I learned that black men were irresponsible, lazy, and unwilling to assume responsibility for their families. That even when black men wanted to be providers and protectors of their families, they could not be because they were castrated. I can still remember looking up the word castration in the dictionary and mulling over its meaning to render impotent by psychological means. My astonishment deepened when I learned that matriarchal black women had been the ones to emasculate and castrate black men. Initially, I found this material amusing because it was so absolutely ludicrous, in no way conforming to my own experience. Initially, it just seemed like the twisted fictions of white supremacy. Our father had always been acutely aware of the way in which white supremacist thinking and action subordinated black men. He let us know early on that the white man did not want the black man to be a man, so he tried to keep him down by denying him jobs, by encouraging him to act like a boy. Mr. Viotis was proud that he was nobody's boy. This critical backdrop provided me with the necessary information to interrogate and challenge the material I was taught in college. Clearly, the perspectives on Black masculinity I was studying had been shaped by racist thinking, by myths and stereotypes. It did not take long for me to realize that those academic discussions of Black masculinity, based on real life studies, highlighted the experiences of poor urban Black males and made that the representative norm. In these studies, there was no diverse masculinity, no wide range of options a black male might choose from to define self and world. The men of my father's generation, born and raised in periods of intense racial apartheid, were far more politicized about racism and imperialism than the young black males I met at college. These young men were far more likely to blame black women than white supremacy for keeping the black man down. This was a far cry from the days when Daddy would come home from work and I would hear him greet our black male neighbor who worked in the mines. Ain't nothing to it. White man running it. There was no day in Daddy's life and in the lives of his hardworking mates that they were not acutely aware of racial injustice and its impact on their lives. These black men did not see themselves as the special victims of white supremacy. They knew it hurt all black people. They had been among the first black men to fight for this country in foreign wars. They had been treated with hatred and contempt. They were expected to die for a country that would not let them live as men. They knew who the enemy was, and it was not their laziness. They knew that they were not lazy because they worked long, hard hours every day. They also knew that black women were not the enemy because these were the arms that embraced and nurtured them when they returned home from fighting the white man's war, from working in the white man's world. Generations of black men who came after my dad, men like my brother, had to some extent been shielded from the hatred and contempt of the white world in ways that their fathers had not. These young black men did not live with the day to day fear that they would be lynched or shot on the spot with impunity for the shooter if they got out of their place. Yet these contemporary young black men had and have had a level of discontent and rage that was and is far deeper than the anger of their fathers because their expectations were and are greater. All of the gains of the civil rights struggle had led them to feel that they were entitled to everything this country had to offer, every benefit, every privilege. They felt they were more entitled to privileges than black women, or, for that matter, any group of women, because they had been sent by the country to wars. They were expected to give their life for the country, and they expected the country to give them something back. Patriarchal thinking fueled black male rage at the end of the 60s and at the beginning of the 70s. This new generation of young black patriarchs had never suffered the abuses their fathers and grandfathers had known. Yet, they were more inclined to weep and moan and expect their tears would be wiped away. They were willing to play the role of victim to the hilt if it meant that they could get over. Unlike their black male ancestors, they were fundamentally opportunistic. Elaine Brown's memoir, A Taste of Power, painfully documents the extent to which many young black males leading the militant black power struggle were psychologically confused. Obsessed with grandiose visions of power, they were willing to engage in coercive domination as a way of asserting control and gaining power. While militant black male leaders challenged white supremacy in productive ways, their uncritical embrace of patriarchy undermined anti racist struggle by falsely projecting the idea that black women were the enemies of black men. Unlike the generations of hardworking patriarchal black men who had preceded them, they passively accepted the white man's account of black masculinity and made it their own. They did not want to be like their fathers. Nathan McCall attests to this fact in his memoir. Makes me want to holler. I never heard my friends say they wanted to be like their fathers when they grew up. Why would we want that when we knew our fathers were catching hell? That would be like saying we wanted to catch hell too. If anything, we wanted to be the opposite of our fathers. We didn't want to work for the white man and end up like them. This was the mindset that led new generations of black males to accept the racist notion that their fathers were not real men, and with it, the idea that black women were somehow in cahoots with white men to keep the black man down. At all other moments in our history, black males and females had recognized that they were in the struggle together. It was assumed that part of what freedom would ultimately bring was a lifestyle where all black men could be patriarchs and keep their women subordinate. To my father, it was a mark of pride that mama did not work when we were growing up. Now and then she did little jobs to buy luxuries for her children. He was not pleased and felt that she was indulging us. Believing that hard work creates discipline, he felt it was important that we learn as children to sacrifice and hard work. My brother did not share this work ethic. He wanted life to be easy. When it was not, he and the males of his generation looked for someone to blame. Our father and the black men of his generation always knew white supremacy was the problem, not black women. When the younger generation of black males could not blame everything on white racism, they targeted black women. By the early 70s, many young black males had begun to denounce black women as traitors, falling into line with the thinking of the Moynihan Report, which suggested that black matriarchy existed, which disempowered black men. They began to suggest that black women should be more subordinate if black men were to assume their rightful place as patriarchs. Love was not the issue. The issue was their ongoing homosocial war with the white men. When Eldridge Cleaver published Soul on Ice, he was not denouncing racist, sexist stereotypes that label all black men racist. Embracing the identity of rapist, he bragged about raping black women as practice for raping white women. Cleaver and the black males who thought as he did were conducting a war on white men over who could be the real man, the hard man, the big dick. In the wake of contemporary feminist movement, black males were daring white men to stand up and celebrate patriarchal masculinity rooted in women hating. Cleaver and other self-declared militant black male leaders said nothing about love. Importantly, we need to remember that it was a white male-dominated publishing industry which printed and sold Soul on Ice. While white male patriarchs were pretending to respond to the demands of the feminist movement, they were allowing and even encouraging black males to give voice to violent women hating sentiments. Since black males were portrayed as victims, castrated and emasculated, white and black women alike were especially forgiving of black male sexism. When individual black women active in the feminist movement challenged black male misogyny, we were attacked as traitors to the race. The publication of Michelle Wallace's Black Macho and the Myth of the Superwoman was the first major attempt by a black woman to critique black male woman hating. It was tactically assumed that were black males able to gain access to the patriarchal privileges that had, for the most part, been denied them, they would love themselves. If they regained their lost manhood, it would come an intact self-esteem and self-love. Tragically, black men did not win the war against white female patriarchs. Our leaders were assassinated and imprisoned. The movement that had begun with a bang ended with a whimper. While many lives had been lost, black people were not free. Without militant warfare, white women were gaining rights and access to jobs that had been denied black people. The ascendancy of white women, who were winning their fight for equal rights with men of their class, seemed to intensify black men's rage, and they gave public voice to fierce women hating. These young men disrespected and devalued black women's place in freedom struggles. Their newly found manhood could only be affirmed when they subordinate women. On the manhood front, the image of the militant black prince fighting for his freedom was soon replaced by the get over playboy image of the daddy Mac, the pimp. Unable to sustain a competitive patriarchal masculinity in the world of work, where control was still in white hands, many patriarchal black men looked to the sexual arena as a place where they could salvage wounded self esteem, where they might not possess the political and economic power of patriarchal white men. They could outdo them on the sexual front. When it came to sex, they could win. Books like Gentlemen of Leisure, A Year in the Life of a Pimp extol the rewards of exploiting women, white and black, to get over. Embracing sexual images that were racist, sexist, and dehumanizing gave black men the license to use and abuse black women. It created division between the sexes in ways that undermined anti racist struggle. Once the image of the playboy was projected as desirable, it became more acceptable for black males to father children and assume no responsibility for parenting. The black men of my father's generation aspired to be benevolent patriarchs, men who would provide for and protect the women and children in their families. They would be heads of households who did not need to use force or coercion to dominate. While they saw women as different, and even inferior, they did not condone the use of force to subordinate females. Non benevolent patriarchs shared the assumption that women were different and inferior, but they also saw females as evil and treacherous. They were invested in women hating. They ruled by coercion and domination. This was the masculinity of the pimp embodied. It was represented in movies as glamorous and powerful. And this is the masculinity young black men are increasingly embracing. Misogynistic rap and women hating hip hop culture continues to encourage black males to hate women and to see being sexual predators as cool. When progressive hip hop spokesperson Kevin Powell critiques black and male sexism, he is often ridiculed by unenlightened black and female, male and female peers. His insightful, powerful essay, Confessions of a Recovering Misogynist, breaks new ground by creating the space for young black males and females to constructively confront sexism by changing their attitudes and behavior. Hardcore pimp masculinity did not and does not place value on love. The Playboy guy was not interested in getting married and having a family. Published in the 70s, Barbara Ehrenreich's book on masculinity, The Heart of Men, American Dreams, and the Flight from Commitment, called attention to the widespread white male embrace of Playboy masculinity. The new Playboy was out to have fun and was willing to use and abuse women in the process. His value and worth was determined by his capacity to seduce women. Children and family were not important. While conservative whites targeted black masculinity, labeling it unstable and irresponsible, they did not launch a critique of the white playboy. As the aging, mostly of white playboys gave up their as the aging, mostly of white playboys gave up their fun and married, black males who embraced pimp masculinity tried to be players forever. If they married, their relationships were torn apart by infidelity and betrayal. White males, playboys, legitimized the rejection of fatherhood, but when this stance was embraced by black males, it had disastrous implications for the black family life. Contrary to popular racist/sexist myths, so-called matriarchal black women did not create instability in black families. Often the black family was first destabilized by the presence of disappointed, angry black fathers and then by absent fathers. In Makes Me Wanna Holler, Nathan McCall courageously makes the point that bitter, angry fathers do not create happy households. That's why I shake my head when I hear so-called experts harping on the problems of black single-parent households. They don't seem to understand that the problems go deeper than that. A two-parent home is not better off than a single-parent home if the father is fucked up in the head and beaten down. There's nothing more dangerous and destructive in a household than a frustrated, oppressed black man. Since conventional patriarchal thinking had socialized women and men in the society to see parenting as a female task, there was no uproar about black males abdicating parenting roles. In the 1980s, as more white men also sought to escape marriage and family, books like Dan Kelly's The Peter Pan Syndrome, Men Who Have Never Grown Up, voiced cultural alarm. Yet his work focused solely on white men, even though its basic ideas described many black males. Kelly's argument was that young boys were learning that growing up meant that they had to work hard and become benevolent patriarchs caring and providing for others. The Peter Pan syndrome emerges when a boy decides he wants to stay young forever and spend his life partying and having fun. Kelly maintained irresponsibility is a key to staying young. In black communities, men had the added advantage of blaming their irresponsible behavior on the system's failure to provide jobs. Since the tenets of patriarchal masculinity upheld the notion that it was not manly to parent lovingly, most unemployed black men did not spend their leisure time with children. They spent time with their female buddies. Despite a huge body of critical writing about the importance of fathers, patriarchal thinking still encourages men and women to believe that paternal contribution to parenting is never as important as that of mothers. Naturally, a culture that teaches everyone that fathers exist to provide material sustenance places no value on the emotional nurturance of fathers. This has been especially true in Black life. When I decided I wanted to have a child, my Black male partner at the time felt he was not ready for fatherhood. Since I believe children should be desired by both parents, I respected his decision. Sharing this information with women, friends of all races, I was stunned by their insistence that if I wanted a baby, I should have one and ignore his wishes. These sentiments were shocking to me given how much we know about the ways children suffer when fathers are uncaring and indifferent. Contrary to what we are told about absent fathers, the focus on whether fathers are present in the home really tends to overlook the more important issue, which is a father's love. As long as our society devalues the importance of male emotional nurturance and love, children will be denied healthy relationships with fathers. All children need to have positive connections to people of both genders, and children desire connections with fathers as much as they do with mothers. This does not mean that children who have fathers present in the home are necessarily more healthy. Clearly, many children who are raised without fathers can and do grow up to be healthy, mature adults. This does not mean that they do not have grief about their absent fathers. In Whatever Happened to Daddy's Little Girl, Jonetta Rose Barrows explores the pain of fatherless daughters. She contends a girl abandoned by the first man in her life forever entertains powerful feelings of being unworthy or incapable of receiving any man's love. Children raised in the most loving lesbian families often still yearn to know about their fathers. When the knowledge they are given is truthful and reassuring, they do not feel psychologically damaged. Father love helps to create a foundation of healthy self esteem among children. It is psychologically damaging to children when fathers are not loving. Most Black fathers are rarely completely absent from a child's life. They may appear and disappear. The issue again is what they give when they are present. Way too many Black fathers give nothing when they are present because society has told them and everyone else either that the emotional contributions of men have no meaning or that to be real men they must withhold affection, affirmation, and love. In our family, the one boy was damaged not because daddy was not present, but because he always treated his son with contempt and disdain, undermining his self esteem and self confidence. This is common in patriarchal family life. Most of the contributors to the anthology, Father Songs Testimonies by African American Sons and Daughters, share stories of emotional and or physical abuse from fathers. In some cases, fathers were present in the family only for a day, a week, a month, but in that short time managed to wreak emotional havoc and, in some cases, wound and scar children for life. A central component of patriarchal thinking is that it is a male role to discipline children. In many homes, such thinking has sanctioned cruel physical punishment of children by adult men. Since women also are socialized to accept patriarchal thinking, lots of women believe that a man is performing his proper role when he acts as an authoritarian disciplinarian. In recent years, Black male thinkers and leaders have joined with conservative white voices to attack female-headed households and to proclaim the need for male and to proclaim the need for male presence. Yet, rarely do these men talk about the substantive qualities men should bring to their role as parents. None of these men talk about the art of loving. If all the critics of Black family life who stress the importance of Black male presence focus on the issue of love, they could not insist, as they do, that Black boys need fathers more than girls do. In her memoir, Laughing in the Dark, Patrice Gaines shares the insight that fathers are just as important to girls as boys. Some fathers, like mine, are absent even when they are present. My deepest self knew that before I went out into the world and found a man to love, I needed to be loved by the first man in my life. I needed a rich and basic love by which to judge the love of all other men. Gaines, like so many of us, never got the affirmation of her value from her father that she longed for. When fathers are present and uncaring or cruel, they do damage. A father who seldom sees a child but gives love contributes more to the child's emotional growth than a father who is present but always indifferent, who shames, coerces, and engages in all manner of abusive behavior. Everyone in our culture is reluctant to talk about the importance of father love. The moment we place love on the agenda, we have to talk about all the forces in our society that keep us from being loving, from loving ourselves and others. Loving fathers do not abandon families. Hence, if our entire culture taught all men the art of loving, we would not have the problem of absent fathers. Within white supremacist capitalist patriarchy, Black males who embrace the values of these ideologies have enormous difficulty with the issue of self-love. Patriarchal thinking certainly does not encourage men to be self loving. Instead, it encourages them to believe that power is more important than love, particularly the power to dominate and control others. Most men in our society are more obsessed with masculinity than with the issue of whether or not they are loving. Frank Pittman writes in Man Enough, the great passion of a man's life. Man enough. The great passion of a man's life may not be for women or men or wealth or toys or fame or even his children, but for his masculinity. And at any point in his life, he may be tempted to throw over the things for which he regularly lays down for his life for the sake of that masculinity. That has been all too true for most black men. Every day of our lives, black men are killing one another to prove their masculinity. Understanding the implication of this, black male poet Exhal Hempel constantly challenged the sexist projection of black women as the enemies of black men. In a conversation with Isaac Julian, published in the anthology Speaking My Name, he shared, "It's important to realize it isn't black women who are gunning down one another. Black women are not gunning us down and beating us to death. We are doing this. Tragically, black male obsession with masculinity is the barrier to keeping individual black men from learning how to love themselves and others. Loving black males find their way to love by letting go of patriarchal thinking, which insists that they be defined by what they do with their penis or how brutal, mean, and dominating they can be towards someone else. Feminist thinking is useful to black males and all males who are grappling with the issue of self love because it offers strategies that enable them to challenge and change patriarchal masculinity. It offers to men a vision of liberatory masculinity. In most families, males are taught to dislike their bodies, to disconnect from them, to believe that they have some uncontrollable sexuality that will get them into trouble. All such thinking undermines a young male's self esteem and self confidence. In Black life, males often learn, on the one hand, to over identify with their penis, and on the other hand, to see the penis and sexuality in general as the enemy of their well being. This then sets the stage for scapegoating and blaming women, whether they be mothers or lovers. As part of this process of developing a feminist consciousness, Kevin Powell reflects on and describes the scapegoating in Keeping It Real. I remembered hating my mother and blaming her for everything terrible in my life: my father's absence, the poverty, the depth with which I hated myself. I remembered how the boys and men in my neighborhood used to talk to their mothers and sisters and girlfriends and wives. More often than not, they would belittle or insult these women or blame them for their problems. When black males stop blaming women or any force outside their control for the inability to take responsibility for their lives, they are on the path to self love and healing. While he does not explore the issue deeply, Kevin Powell does raise the useful point that his mother often took total responsibility for all his needs, and as a consequence, he did not learn the skills for basic care. Dan Kelly identified this as one of the symptoms of the Peter Pan syndrome. Black mothers, like other women in patriarchal society, often feel they are fulfilling their rightful role by serving males, whether they are husbands or sons. It is not unusual to hear young black males make demands for service from grandmothers or mothers and sisters, and is often seen as a sign of healthy masculinity. In reality, the male who never learns how to take care of his basic needs is infantilized. Mothers who indulge sons and allow them to be irresponsible are not being loving. Their actions are motivated by their desire to bind the boy to them. This is a context that breeds emotional incest, which is as dangerous to a boy's self esteem as physical incest. We have all heard black males praise their mothers and fault the other women in their lives who did not subordinate to their needs to his the way his mama did. Contrary to popular myth, boys raised in single parent female headed households are usually taught patriarchal thinking in these homes. Often it is their mother who teaches them that women should be subordinate to men, that by virtue of maleness they should have more power and privilege. When patriarchal society affirms this truth, mother's disrespect is echoed. They and other women can be blamed as a source of male's unhappiness and failure in life. The flip side of the indulgent subordinated mother, who bends over backward to meet her son's every need, is the domineering, verbally and or physically abusive mother, who uses shaming and constant humiliation as a means of disciplining male children. Insightfully, in The Mermaid and the Minotaur, Dorothy Dinnerstein links this early adult female domination of the boy child to a penchant for male violence against women in later life. In two parent houses where adult males degrade mothers, boys who witness this may be overwhelmed by guilt and spend their lives trying to give their mother the care she has been denied. In all homes, be they single or two parent households, boys are damaged when mothers force them to be symbolic partners. While they may strive to satisfy the mom, they feel rage and resentment that they are placed in this position. All single mothers, black and non black, who raise healthy sons, who later become mature, responsible men, capable of giving and receiving love, know that it is a lie that only men can raise sons. Patriarchal culture currently seeks to devalue single mothers by insisting that they cannot raise healthy sons, even though there is no documentation to show this truth. All the data we have available documents the fact that loving single mothers can and do parent sons who are as healthy as those two parent households. Dysfunctional households rarely produce psychologically healthy boys, whether they are single or two parent households. When the focus is on Black life and the parenting of boys, mainstream culture likes to insist that only Black men can raise healthy boys. Underlying this insistence is the assumption that these boys need coercive discipline, which only a Black male authority figure can give. All these assumptions about the needs of Black boys are informed by racist and sexist stereotypes, which identify these children as dangerous threats to the safety of everyone else, whose spirits must be tamed or broken early in life. Tragically, more and more Black people endorse and support this line of thought. No public leaders talk about Black boys needing healthy love, which necessarily includes teaching children how to be disciplined, along with other life enhancing skills. Whose interest does it really serve to instill in the public's imagination that only Black men can raise a healthy Black male child in a society where so many Black males refuse to engage in parenting? Following this logic would lead to the assumption that all Black males raised in female headed households are unhealthy and dysfunctional. Certainly, such thinking does not serve the interests of Black boys or the women who provide them with parental care. While it is clear that Black boys and all children need positive connections with adult men, these men do not need to have to be fathers. It is also clear that women alone can raise a healthy boy child. For too long, single mothers of all races have been made to feel that the lack of male parental influence is their fault. No one has prevented Black males of any group of males or any group of males from parenting their children. There is no evidence to support that the notion that healthy mothers try to keep healthy fathers away from sons or daughters. The hard truth is that this nation does not want to face is that most patriarchal men, irrespective of their racial identity, do not wish to be loving parental caretakers. Attacks on black single mothers raising their sons are rooted in women hating. They make all single mothers feel that they are failing sons if they cannot bring a father presence into the home, or they make mothers fear that they will harm their sons by loving them. Pittman suggests the single mother and her fatherless son may fear that her love will hurt her son. She may pull back from him and thus withdraw the only parenting the boy ever got. In protecting him from what she believes to be her dangerous love, she may inadvertently turn him into an orphan. When this happens, boys suffer. In The Courage to Raise Good Men, therapist Olga Silverstein says, in the name of being a good mother, sometimes we sacrifice our very beliefs about right and wrong, abandoning our sons to the prevailing culture. Healthy mothers and fathers know that the patriarchal vision of masculinity puts their sons at risk. While it may help them grow into acceptable macho men capable of being hard, it will not teach them how to know who they are, be responsible, and be able to love. Black mothers raising non sexist sons in patriarchal culture must work doubly hard to counter negative messages about masculinity in female leadership. Opposing patriarchal notions of masculinity is one way to support boys and men in their efforts to be self loving. Olga Silverstein identifies the good man as one who will be empathic and strong, autonomous and connected, responsible to self, family, and friends, and to society, and capable of understanding how responsibilities are ultimately inseparable. In my life, I have had an opportunity to know the love of caring, good Black men. In each case, these men are individuals who have dared to break with conventional macho masculinity and care for their souls and inner life. When Black males internalize the values of white supremacist capitalist patriarchy, they deny their need to love and be loved. Mature, decolonized Black men know love is the healing force that allows true freedom. They know that loving males and females together or alone can chart the path to self actualization for Black boys and lost Black men seeking to find their way home. Jarvis J. Masters is a loving Black male confined to death row. Using his time of enforced solitude to explore the interiors of his mind and heart, he came to the realization that many inmates were victims of extreme child abuse, sharing, "Throughout my many years of institutionalization, I, like so many of these men, unconsciously took refuge behind prison walls. Not until I read a series of books for adults who had been abused as children did I become committed to the process of examining my own childhood. The child of a drug addicted mother and a violent stepfather, who at 4 witnessed the death of his baby brother, Masters realized that he, like other Black men, did not fear prison because it is a place that welcomes a man who is full of rage and violence. By learning self love, Masters practiced forgiveness and compassion. When his mother died, his fellow inmates could not understand his longing to have been with her because she had neglected him. Being self loving, he responded, "But am I to neglect myself as well by denying that I wish I'd been with her when she died, that I still love her?" Masters shows that it is never too late for Black males to learn the art of loving. Stevie Wonder often sings the lyrics, "I want to know what love is, and I want you to show me." Free Black men know love.